Hello, everyone. I think that, oh, wow. I'm not used to all of that amplification in such a tiny room, but can all of you hear me in the back? That was a joke. Yeah. So I think I've greeted each of you personally, but welcome to all of you. We are very glad you're here. Most of you in the room, though not all, have not been here before, although some of you work here, but most of you have not been here before. So let me just say something about the cathedral. This cathedral is about 130 years, 135 years into its life. It was built from this east end to the west end. As we always say, it is 2 football fields long. And I also like to say it is a grand exercise in 19th century Anglican hubris, because it is an enormously large building for such a small group of people. But it was built with a dream that this would be a gathering place not only for us Episcopalians throughout the diocese, but for all sorts of people in New York City. And so we tend to think of this, without any disregard for any of the other cathedrals in the city, as sort of the cathedral of the city of New York, a great place of assembly and dialogue. So we're delighted that you've come to this place of assembly for this event. As you know, we have a rather robust June series of programming with regard to Pride. And let me say something about how that happened. 2.5 years ago, actually it's 2 years ago, right now, come to think of it, when Roe versus Wade was overturned, we here at the Cathedral realized that the next target of the political right would be LGBTQ people. And while we did not do anything in advance of the Roe decision, we knew that we had to do something in anticipation of the stands that would be taken against queer people. And so we decided to create a robust program series for last June. And it was very diverse and very successful. So successful that we immediately decided to do it again, but to do it bigger. And so you all, I think, have received the postcard with all of the programming listed on it. And this is the last of all of the events in the programming cycle. So why the Episcopal Church has gradually evolved to have such a positive response to LGBTQ people, I can't quite say. But during my time in the church, I came to this church when it was already quite LGBTQ friendly, and it has only become more so. I would say, as a priest, that it is by God's grace that this is happening, but wherever it's happening, I'm grateful to be a part of it, and I'm grateful to welcome you into it. So, I'd like to tonight introduce you to the folks who will join me in our conversation, some of whom I've only met this evening, and I'm grateful to meet them, and I know you will be too. The first is Matthew Turchin, who is right here in the front, who will be, we're going to call him Rabbi, though the truth is he's not going to be ordained to the rabbinate for 1 more week. So we should give him a hand, right? Because, people always should get a hand, when their lives are about to end. So he will be ordained at the West London Synagogue in England. He is a member, what he's told me now is a conglomeration of liberal Jewish groups in the United Kingdom, who are not just Reformed, but I think you said progressive, is that right? So he's being ordained a progressive rabbi in the United Kingdom, and we're very lucky that he just happens to be in New York today. So thank you, Matthew. Next to Matthew is Bryan Massingale. Bryan Massingale is a Roman Catholic priest of the Diocese of Milwaukee, but also by God's grace, is a member of the theology faculty at Fordham University here in New York. And Father Massingale specializes in social ethics and theological ethics. And Father Massingale is one of the, but certainly one of the only publicly gay priests in the American Roman Catholic Church. So that is quite a distinction. Zain, where is Zain? Oh, there's Zain, is way back in the back. He's the sort of a standalone speaker. Zain Islam-Hashmi is chair of Hadaya USA, and Hadaya is an organization dedicated to the care and support of LGBTQIA plus Muslims, and their education and advocacy in the larger culture about LGBTQ Muslims and the issues in their lives. He is a design strategist and who came to Hadaya because during the pandemic, as we all did, he listened to podcasts. And through those podcasts found queer Muslim people with whom he could identify and resonate. And that led him to Hadaya, where those podcasts had come from, and now he is the director of Hadaya USA, but there's also Hadaya UK. But Zain is the American linchpin. And I am Patrick Malloy. I've met all of you. I'm the dean of this cathedral, which in Anglican speak means that I'm the CEO of the cathedral and the senior-most priest at the cathedral. So I'm both the temporal and the spiritual leader of the cathedral. I'm not sure I do very well at the first. I know I do terribly at the second. So, but now, the last member of our panel is Fran Marshall. And this is Fran Marshall. And Fran Marshall is the reason we're here tonight, because Fran is the photographer whose work we've admired and we're going to now reflect upon. Fran is here because a friend of mine, Father Charlie Bell, who's a priest of the Church of England and a psychiatrist, who is also a scholar in residence here at the cathedral, told me that he had been photographed by this remarkable woman, this Irish woman living now in the UK, who actually is an opera photographer, an arts photographer, but who, and Fran will talk to you about this, decided to start doing portraits of queer religious leaders. So through Father Bell's introduction, Fran and I met and had a great conversation. And then we all decided together to bring her collection of photographs here as part of the programming for our June Pride Month, the sort of the visual artistic part of the month. This cathedral has always had a commitment to the overlap between theology and art, between religion and art. Before there ever was a cathedral, the first thing this cathedral owned before it owned even a brick were tapestries that were given to us as soon as the building of this cathedral was announced. A collection of Barberini tapestries woven in Rome was given to the cathedral as sort of the beginning of our patrimony, and 4 of them you'll see when you leave tonight are hanging in the crossing. So art and religion have been woven here, no pun intended, from the very, very beginning of our life. And so Fran's work continues in a long tradition, and it's perfect. So what I'd like to do now is have Fran come here and lead you through a slide presentation that will really give you the history of this entire project. So, Fran Marshall.
Hello, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to thank the wonderful, very Reverend Patrick Malloy for inviting me here today and for hosting the Queer Religion exhibition and panel here at St. John the Divine. It's been an unbelievable experience for me. Also, a massive thank you to our amazing panelists who have agreed to be here today, and last but not least, to every one of you who has turned up to engage in the project. Thank you so much. So my name is Frances Marshall. I'm a photographer and I'm from Dublin. I now live in London with my wife Sophie and our 7-month-old baby boy Ted and our dog and our cat. And there's so much about this sentence that I just can't believe is true, and that this is the life that I get to live. Being a married lesbian mother working in my dream career is not something that was ever presented to me growing up as a possibility, and I just feel so lucky to experience this life. I generally work in the area of opera and classical music, and this is the sort of stuff that I usually shoot. However, today I'm here to talk to you about my collection, Queer Religion, which I've been working on for the past 2 years. I'd love to give you some insight into how the project came about. And like most of us in Ireland, I was raised Roman Catholic, attended Catholic schools, practicing Catholic, until coming out as a lesbian at the age of 19, and I converted to atheism. And at the time, it felt impossible to exist in both faith and queerness, and I chose to love myself and reject a belief system that deemed my existence to be sinful. I came across the words of Northern Ireland journalist Lyra McKee, who was murdered at the age of 29. And she perfectly summed up my thoughts around this. As a Catholic, the first thing you learn about being gay is that it's evil and that you're going to hell. And that's straight out of the Bible. For many, the Bible is a place of solace and contemplation, and for queer people, it's a prison sentence. I'm so proud to be Irish, and Ireland is an incredible country full to the brim with rich culture and warmth. However, we are still very much caught in the tight grasp of the Catholic Church. Father Bernard Lynch said to me recently that Ireland is currently experiencing a great adolescence when it comes to religion. However, to this day in the Republic of Ireland, 88% of our schools are considered Catholic, and many of the hospitals still operate under a Catholic ethos. Also, according to the 2022 census, 69% of the population identify as Roman Catholic. In my mid-20s, I trained as a secondary school music and English teacher, and during this period, I was subject to the Section 37 bill. So this allowed for the discrimination against workers based on their family status and sexual orientation. And to put it simply, my colleagues found out that I was gay in work, I would lose my position in the school. So to make things worse, in the year 2000, the European Equality Directive provided an exemption to schools in Ireland run by the Catholic Church to maintain this bill, and finally it was amended in 2015. I found this bill so suffocating that I quit teaching altogether and fully committed to photography and moved to London. So the outcome was pretty good. But my point in sharing this story with you is to highlight that not even atheism could protect me. So to quote biosocial anthropologist Chelsea Shields, religion is more than belief, it's power and its influence, and that influence affects all of us, regardless of your own belief. Criticism does not change things, and neither does invalidation, so how do we walk this tightrope? This is an exhibition that came from an unresolved place in my heart, and I created the majority of the collection while I was pregnant with the consistent and loving support of my wife, Sophie, and with the hope of making a positive contribution to the world in advance of our son being born. My goal for this collection was to rid religion of queer phobia, and even saying it out loud, it sounds not only incredibly simplistic, but also ridiculously naive. However, it is my dream, and why not share it with you today? The only way to do this was to work from the inside out, have very difficult conversations, and put myself on the firing line. So this is how the project came about. When I moved to London, I was blown away by the incredible diversity of race, faith, culture, and the level of artistry and creativity was magic. And the first step into this project happened a few years ago when I was living in the east of the city. I wanted to create a collection on the subject of diversity of religion in London, and I reached out to a local priest in a nearby Catholic church and asked for a meeting. We sat in the pews, and within 5 minutes, completely disconnected from the conversation we were having, he began to speak of the sin of abortion and homosexuality. And I came away feeling empty and lost. There was just no way I was going to elevate a voice like this or anything like it. And even as a documentary project, I couldn't give oxygen to this misogynistic, queerphobic rhetoric that surrounded my childhood. So I parked the project and I took a breath. Some time passed and I went to the glorious celebration of London Pride. And I was standing amongst the crowd and watching a drag show in Soho, as you do. And when I looked up, I saw a priest hanging out of the window with a pride flag draped below him and enjoying the atmosphere, which is this image here. And I took a photograph. Soon after, we were invited to a dinner party where I met an Anglo-Catholic priest and his husband. And we got on so well that I asked him if we could go for lunch. We sat across from each other in the pub in Hither Green, and he asked me, "Why did you leave your faith?" And I said I was tired of shrinking myself for an organisation that just had no respect for me. He understood completely. He then asked me, "What would have made it better for you?" And I said I needed a priest or a religious leader to tell me that it was okay to be gay, and not just okay, that it was a gift to have the capacity to love and be loved. And he said, "You know those religious figures exist." And that was it. The seed for this project was planted. And that conversation set me on a path to create what I'm speaking to you about today. To work in an area focusing on both queerness and religion is to stand in one of the greatest paradoxes that the world has to offer. Every subject that I've worked with in this collection is a beacon of beauty, self-reflection, bravery, dignity, and poetry. They are truly some of the finest individuals that I have ever met. And before I present the imagery, I just want to show my endless gratitude to them for welcoming me so warmly into their lives and allowing me to take these portraits. Also, I'd like to point out that I'm first and foremost a photographer, and I'm far from a theology scholar or queer specialist. And all that I discuss in this talk is generally from personal experience. And if I use the wrong term or mispronounce anything, please feel free to let me know. The subjects I'm covering are immensely vast. I'm very well aware that I'm a work in progress. So along with the imagery, I've asked each subject to provide a quote about queerness in religion, which you can read on each slide as I go through. So my first subject is Father Jarrell Robinson Brown, an openly gay Anglo-Catholic priest. I first met Jarrell at his home in East London with his dog Seb, who attends the services at St. Baldolph with Aldgate and sits beside him on the altar. This key image here was the winner of the Portrait of Britain and part of a nationwide exhibition in the British Journal of Photography. My second subject is Shaira Chowdhury, a transgender Muslim woman who is also a co-founder of Trans Activism UK. Myself and Shaira had the most beautiful afternoon discussing so many subjects. I felt my heart and mind open to many areas of intersectionality that I'd never before considered. She shared beautiful stories about her family and the unwavering support she felt in her home. Her mother was a fashion designer, and this was the way that she formed a deeper connection that greatly contributed to Shaira being gender affirmed as they worked together to create beautiful bespoke clothing. The next subject is the wonderful Rabbi Mark Solomon. Mark welcomed me into his gorgeous home in North London, where we drank tea and ate about 25 biscuits with his lovely partner Lobo, who's also an actor. And there was a lot of laughter, and we spoke about many topics. Mark's journey from Orthodox Judaism to liberal Judaism is one of the most fascinating stories that I've heard, and his open heart, generosity, and side-splitting humor meant that we ended up spending hours together. Next, we have the wonderful Father Charlie Bell, who you all know, some of you know, who is a gay Anglo-Catholic priest. From the moment we spoke, Charlie fascinated me. While also being an ordained priest, he, at the St. John the Divine in Kennington in London, Charlie worked as a doctor of psychiatry at the Massingale Hospital, and he doesn't take a salary from the church as he feels it's the only way for him to be able to speak the truth. Charlie is a kind and seriously funny man, and like all of the subjects in this collection, is a true activist and published author. Next, we have Jewish chaplain Harry Cedar, who identifies as non-binary and married to artist Jill Bradley. I had a lovely morning with Harry at their place of work at King's College London, where they engage as a chaplain with staff and students of any or no faith. And while also having a PhD in cancer stem cells, we spoke of the blend of faith and science and the vast differences between the various faiths when it comes to this topic. We now have Mother Christina Beardsley, who was a transgender woman and priest in the Church of England. Tina lives with her husband Rob in West London, and as I photographed her in her home in St. John's Church in Fulham, we spoke about her role as healthcare chaplain in Chelsea Westminster Hospital and the essential role of the Equality Act and the journey of trans rights over the past number of decades. Her warm and open heart is an unforgettable presence to experience. She is truly a legendary figure. My next subject is Dina Al-Aqsa. Dina is a lesbian Muslim award-winning journalist and works with Hidayah, which is a support charity for queer Muslims who we mentioned before. Dina is not her real name, and in order to live her life in a queer space, she operates under this alias to protect herself. We spoke in great depth about the realities of being a queer Muslim and the construct of anonymity. The idea of anonymity is generally thought of as one of hiding and shame. However, the more we spoke, I realised that this was entirely a Western bias. We spoke about the queer society in London and how it rarely accommodates queer Muslims, as most spaces are alcohol-focused. And the issue of Islamophobia within the queer community is also an intersectionality that I feel we really do need to address. We now look to Rabbi Indigo Jonah Raphael, a South African transgender man living in North London with his wife Ruthie. We had a wonderful afternoon together, and we spoke about coming to terms with experiencing the concept of male privilege after transition, which was fascinating in many respects when it came to faith and society. along with the essential importance of being yourself no matter what the consequences may be. Reverend G.D. Macaulay, who is our next subject, is a British-Nigerian minister who is a HIV-positive activist and founded the House of Rainbow to help openly queer people in Nigeria. G.D. is warm, wonderful, and a beautiful person to experience. And you may know our next subject, the very Reverend Patrick Malloy, who has made all of this happen. Myself and Patrick had a number of phone calls putting this project together, and from the beginning, I found him to be an exceptional leader in queer affirming work. To have a month-long Pride programme in a cathedral is a great thing to witness, and I am so grateful and thrilled to be part of it. We now have Jane Ozanne, who is the founder of the Global Interfaith Commission on LGBT Lives. Jane is an evangelical Anglican and is also a survivor of conversion therapy and chairs the UK Ban Conversion Therapy Coalition. Working with the evangelical space to improve the lives of queer people is one of the most brave choices. And I found my work in this collection. There is a frightening queerphobic rhetoric amongst this community in particular that causes a great deal of pain to its queer congregants. Our next subject is the wonderful Father Bryan Massingale, who is on our panel here tonight. Father Bryan is an openly gay Roman Catholic priest and has a beautiful parish at St. Charles of Borromeo in Harlem, where I had the privilege of attending the morning service yesterday, which was an incredible experience. Bryan is truly an iconic figure and an accidental activist due to his brave stance on these issues, and he's also a professor of theology at Fordham University. Our next subject is the lovely religion teacher, George White, at St. Paul's Catholic School in Leicester. George is a transgender man and Catholic religion teacher. It is so important to me to have a subject from the education sector in this collection, as this is the space that plays a crucial role in forming our opinions and our sense of belonging that can, if handled well, be a positive force that can bring great comfort and support to us for the rest of our lives. Some of you may know Sister Janine Gramick. During one of our trips to London last year, Sister Janine, who's a Roman Catholic religious sister and advocate for lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender rights. Her work is unparalleled when it comes to fighting for queer rights within the Catholic Church, and she's an absolute force to be reckoned with. Rabbi Natasha Mann identifies as bisexual and leads the New London Synagogue. She is affiliated to Masorti Judaism and is the first openly queer rabbi in a traditional Jewish denomination in Europe. Natasha said something so profound to me during our time together. She said, in Judaism, tension is not a bad thing. And I had the biggest aha moment of the project when I heard this sentence. Natasha brought me on the most unforgettable tour, showed me the beautiful Torahs, and we spoke for hours of the Jewish experience when it came to the diaspora. It also opened up an incredible conversation on the similarities between the Irish and Jewish experience, which was again something that I'd never thought of. Our next subject is Father Simon Buckley, a gay priest in St. Anne's Church in Soho. Simon is based in the heartbeat of queerness in London and knows too well the responsibilities of his position. Unknowingly to Simon, he played a huge role in this project, as he is the priest from the window that I showed you earlier. Our paths crossed again when I had a shoot in St. Anne's and realised that he was the same person, and I had to have him as part of the collection, and I was thrilled when he agreed. Before being an ordained priest, Simon was one of the UK's leading puppet makers and practitioners with a thriving career on ITV. And we now have Ruby Almeida, who is a lesbian Roman Catholic queer faith advocate. I met with Ruby at Farm Street Church, and for the first time in 10 years, I attended a mass. And Ruby works with many organisations and support groups for queer people of faith. Originally born in India, we spoke about topics surrounding the blend of Indian culture and Catholicism, and Ruby sees no conflict between her faith and sexuality, and has said coming out strengthened rather than weakened her faith. My penultimate subjects are the wonderful lesbian couple Cantor Tamara and Rabbi Anna Wolfson. I originally met these great women at a Thanksgiving dinner hosted by friends of ours who were here today. And we all got on so well that I asked them both to be subjects in this collection, and I insisted that we included the dogs. So these two are beacons of light and symbolize a true sense of love and compassion that every couple could learn from. Last but not least, we have Father Bernard Lynch, who is an Irish gay Roman Catholic priest who lives in North London with his husband Billy. Bernard is renowned for his human rights work with HIV/AIDS and with the queer community, mainly in New York. He founded Dignity, which was a queer Catholic group that created a safe place for people with HIV/AIDS during the HIV pandemic, who faced unbearable discrimination at the hands and sermons of the Catholic Church. Bernard has received many international awards for his humanitarian work and is the subject of a number of documentaries, which I'd highly recommend that you look at. So as I come to the end of this presentation, I would love us to think about what can be done in this area. I've been shocked and warmed by the response of this collection. It's opened my mind and heart in so many ways in a polarized world, and I wanted to create something that brought us all a little bit closer. It has proven to me time and time again that it's not buildings and history that create institutions, it's people. People like Patrick Malloy at St. John Divine, who is responsible for everything that you're experiencing here. I was recently invited by George White to present this collection at the St. Paul's Catholic School in Leicester. George is a religion teacher at the school and runs the diversity program, which is exceptional. However, after giving his talk to multiple year groups, these were the questions that came from the crowd, the same talk that you've heard today. How did you get pregnant? How do two women make a baby? Is it better to be a gay man or a lesbian woman? What's non-binary mean? And these were teenagers. And the questions went on like this, and I'll be honest, they really caught me off guard. But I answered each and every one of them in the best capacity because it suddenly dawned on me that kids just still don't have that queer visibility in adult figures that they can fire their awkward questions at. Once those points of confusion were cleared, the real work began. The question emerged multiple times: will your parents still love you after you come out? It really does send a shiver up my spine that we're still carrying this one in our youth. I told them that it's your parents' job to love you for exactly who you are, and it's never your job to convince them. My point in telling you this story is to show how crucial visibility really is. It's very simple, but that doesn't mean it's uncomplicated to get there. If you'd like to think about how to help this project move forward, I'm currently looking for an art book publisher who'd be interested in taking this project on. And the next stop for the collection will be Cambridge University in the UK, Southwark Cathedral in London, and Exeter Cathedral in the south. I'd be so grateful if you could share this collection in whatever way you can. I'd like to conclude this presentation by returning to the words of Lyra McKee: great change of perception always starts with a conversation. Thank you.
So we're going to have a conversation. So maybe if my friends would come up here so that you can see us and hear us. So I'd like to begin by asking the others here what it's been like to be either an openly queer person or a very public supporter and defender and friend of queer people in your own tradition. And if you don't mind, Father, I'd like to begin with you because I would just think, as I said, you are such a rarity, being a publicly gay Roman Catholic priest, that I wonder if you could say something about that. And there are microphones everywhere, so you have to share them around.
I think it's on. Good. Well, thank you all for coming. Yeah, it's strange that yesterday you were at the Church of St. Charles Borromeo, and in one sense, being an openly gay Catholic priest is shockingly normal. I mean, it was like, I told the people that, who she was and why she was there, and they were just like, oh, isn't that wonderful? And we're doing a baptism, and she asked whether she could, take pictures of the baptism and give them to the couple for free, and they were like, oh, wonderful. And so it was like it's in one sense remarkably normal, in another sense profoundly abnormal. I have been gay to myself since I was 22 years old, so many years ago. When I decided to come public about it I was giving a talk to an international gathering of Catholic queer activists working in the Catholic Church for greater acceptance. And each of them brought an artifact from their country to talk about the situation of people in their country. And a woman from the Congo brought a poster board full of people's faces who have been imprisoned, beaten, tortured, killed because of their sexuality. And there was a stunned silence in the room. And Ruby, the woman you saw, was one of the people present, and she broke the silence by saying, "I feel as if we're at the foot of the cross." A break, and then I'm supposed to talk. And I really had I was torn. I was like, what can I possibly say to these people? And I realized that if I was going to ask them to continue the difficult, dangerous, risky work that they were doing, then I needed to be able to take a risk as well. And that's when I came out publicly as a black gay Catholic priest. Everyone accepted it fine, and then they said, well, can we publish it on our website? And not only publish it on our website, but publish it in English, and French, and German, and Italian, and Portuguese. And so it just went a bit viral after that. And that's when the stuff happened. There were bishops who said that I could no longer speak in their diocese. Invitations to speak were revoked. I was scheduled to speak on racial justice, my other full-time job, at a Catholic seminary. And they said I could not do that because I might put strange ideas in the seminarians' heads. And so in one sense, and I lost some of my Catholic priest friends, because many of them said, well, if we hang around with you, what will people say about us? And I said, well, girl, not anything they're not saying already, please. So in one sense, it's been, from the people, remarkable acceptance, seriously. From the hierarchy and from my fellow priests, there's been resistance. Sometimes they come to me like Nicodemus at night, I'm gay too. I said, really? But it's strange to be a public carrier of people's hopes and dreams and imaginations. But in one sense, I have never been happier. I have never been happier and more fulfilled. So I'll stop there, because I could talk forever. So thank you for the question.
And Zain, I'm wondering about you, because you belong to a religious tradition that, unlike Father Massingale's and mine, is not hierarchical at all. And yet it is perceived, at least generally, as not being friendly to queer people. And so I wonder what your experience has been like as an American Muslim and being publicly gay.
Sure. So it's on a similar but also very different note, because I feel that in Islam, it's a very strange thing that I was even talking about Francis this morning about, is the fact that when we are taught Islam, for most of us who are born into the faith, it's just told us as a base standard of being a Muslim that you will be with someone of the opposite assigned gender. It's not even entertained, this idea of that there's no possibility of like being with someone else. And so I think with that in mind, it's almost like it's a different type of homophobia that queer Muslims have to kind of start to deal with, where it's not like a hatred, it's just actually like fathoming the idea of even existing, that I think most of us have to kind of start to reconcile, and that is always the first step. And so for me, I think I've been very lucky, very blessed, and very privileged to be able to have been in a surrounding where I could come out, to where I could be proud, and to be surrounded by people that would accept me. For me, it took actually traveling to and working in like a French countryside chateau for like a summer, you know, what you do in college. But getting out of my prescribed community and realizing that I can be whoever I want, there will be people there to accept me. And so when I finally found that taste of freedom and realizing this is what it means to really actually connect with people as my true authentic self, going back to my home community, I realized that I can't go back to being inauthentic. There's just no way. And so I think it has been lucky, and I think for queer Muslims, it's really actually not the wider congregation or community that we actually are concerned about. 9 times out of 10 for queer Muslims, it's their family. It is the family unit, because that is the basis of Islam for many people. So when we get, as a queer Muslim organization, we get queries from people around the country, around the world. And I mean, the first things will always be questions about, like, you know, can I be queer or Muslim? It's always about like that self-internal battle. The second question is almost always, how do I talk to my family about this? Because that is like the second most important thing to them. It's their faith, and then it's their community, which is their family. So I think that is always probably the toughest part for people, and I think even for just queer people in general, because you're asking people who have seen you and shaped you your entire life to now see you in a completely different way. And I think that is always just the hardest struggle for you and also for them, because they are also now having to grapple with this immense change that you are asking from them as well. And then I think the wider Islamic community, the Ummah, that kind of comes like tertiary, in my opinion, from what I've seen. Because it's, for good and for worse, I think in the Islamic community, especially in the US, from what I've noticed, people will never really say things to your face. They say it behind your back. Is that good? Is that better? Is that worse? You know, I think it's different for everyone. But for me, I've been blessed that no one has said anything to my face. The people who have, it's more so just curiosity, the fact that you can be both. How do you do that? Or how do you embrace being both? Or like, how did you come to terms with both? What they say behind me, my back, it's not my thing to judge, not my thing to say, not my monkeys and not my circus to change. Whenever they decide to come around to it, then we'll have that conversation. But I think that's the thing for queer Muslims. It's just, you have to worry about ourselves first, and then worry about our families. And then the wider ummah, we can't change them, but we can only ask that, you know, they start to kind of come into the fold at one point. But it's very difficult, because we're battling not only our communities, we're tackling governments as well, who are really against us. Years, decades, centuries of homophobia, patriarchy, racism, other isms as well. So it can be difficult, but I don't know. I think there's also the fact that Islam is also about peace. And I think once you come to terms with yourself, there's that inner peace that you find. And for me, it was really important because my work is based in community design efforts. And I ask to connect with people and to talk with them. And for me, I came out because it was hard for me to connect with people and ask them to be authentic with me if I'm not being authentic with them about myself, or even authentic with myself. But yeah, thank you so much for that question.
Thank you, Zain. Yeah, thank you. This is very, very personal, and I appreciate that. So, Rabbi, your situation is different because, as I understand it, you are not queer identifying, but you certainly are a great supporter of people who are queer identifying. And I wonder, as such a strong, and this is a fraught word, ally, within Judaism, what has been your reception in your Jewish community, either here in America or in the United Kingdom, as a strong supporter of LGBTQ people?
Well, first I just want to say, I know you expected me to be British. I am not. Not from far away. But having studied in the United Kingdom, it's hard to express how every single Jewish person photographed for this exhibition is someone I know and have spoken with, outside of this project, people who are woven into the fabric of British Judaism. And I think we do need to own that a lot of the negativity, it's from our communities, and it's deeply ingrained within that fabric of our religions, right? So if I go to an Orthodox synagogue, and even Rabbi Natasha Mann's synagogue, as a man, I might say as part of my morning blessings, thank you, God, for not having made me a woman. And I want to think for a second about a female gay rabbi having to say those words. The female version of that is, thank you for making me according to your will. And the progressive one that we would use in my synagogue is, thank you for making me B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. And as part of my rabbinic dissertation, one of the things I looked at was, what does that image of God mean? And when we go back to Genesis and we see God created a human with two faces, man and woman, they were created. But that's not the whole story. Is it ever the whole story? And so we look later to the Talmud, and this is the kind of conversation I want to have with people. The Talmud, hundreds of years later, and still 1,500 years ago, we were talking about 8 genders. And people are shocked to hear about the 8 genders, right? So what are they? Well, male and female. That one was obvious for people. There's something called androgynous, which I think makes sense. We're not sure. Then there's tumtum, which means neither. There's just no identifying factor. And my favorite are the last 4, which are a person who is born as a woman, later, it turns out, is a man, just naturally, or, next category, through human intervention, realizes and becomes a man. And then there's the inverse, born a man and transitions either naturally or through human intervention. And they were thinking about this 1,500 years ago and just saying it, not arguing about it. The Talmud is full of arguments, and I guarantee moments where they're getting into debates over whose penis is bigger. Like, it's not a joke. The Talmud is a scary place and a beautiful place, but what it does is it gives us legal debate. And if we can't have the conversation, if we can't even bring it up, then we're not inviting people into our space. And if we can't show them where it's right in the fabric, where the people that are our leaders are leading in a way that their entire self is expressed, right? I know how easy it is to take off my kippah and hide. And it's easy. It's so easy. The harder thing is to put it on. And the harder thing is to be yourself. And so we have a policy at West London Synagogue where we have 2 gay rabbis and 2 straight rabbis, and that is, you speak about something the other person might be struggling with. So I'm going to talk about feminism, I'm going to talk about gay rights, and they're going to talk about things I might be struggling with, like being neurodiverse.
So everyone here, I think, has taken brave stands for the sake of queer people, whether we're queer or not. I think as those of you in this room, probably most of you, though not all, are from New York City, and we live in this sort of safe bubble. But all of the world is not that safe bubble. And if you were here at Evensong yesterday, I preached, and I mentioned that yesterday before the morning mass, Mother Eva Suarez and I were doing the liturgy yesterday. She was presiding and I was preaching. And we were accosted in front of the cathedral by a family who wanted to challenge the fact that we were gay positive and wanted to challenge her for being a woman in authority. And clearly we were absolutely violating, in their world, the Bible, which is they're sort of biblically fixated, so that we were violating the Bible in all sorts of ways. And sort of then we had to walk inside after being berated on the street and try to preside over the community's worship. And so I realized that there still is a lot of resistance. And I just wonder what resistance you have found and how you deal with that. And just for example, yesterday, I am not the sort of person who knows what to do, and I feel bad about this, to do when someone throws at me all these clobber verses from the Bible, you gay people. I just don't know what to do because we Episcopalians don't. That's not the way we do church. So I felt totally inept, and they probably thought I was a fool. But I wonder, so Fran, you go on the road and you put all this out there, both yourself as a lesbian and these photographs as examples of exemplars. How are you getting pushback? And what do you do about that?
I have, is this on? Do I have the right one? Can you hear me? Is this on? Is this?
Yes,
Oh, you can hear me, sorry. Thank you. I haven't had a single moment of pushback. Not a single bad email, not a single comment, not a single derogatory comment. Nothing negative has happened towards this collection. Now, I keep asking myself why that is. Is it because I identify as an atheist? Is it because my world is queer affirming? That I built that world for myself? What is causing that? And what I find so fascinating is that the religious spaces are profoundly open to having this collection in here. And, I think it's so important to acknowledge our allies, because when Matt's saying something like, I know the rabbis in this, it's because Matt and Avi, his wife Avi, who's sitting here as well, introduced me and worked really hard to connect me with these people, because I did not know they existed until people like Matt and Avi came into my life. And the first places that it was exhibited was synagogues, super open. We sat at that Thanksgiving meal. I said what I wanted to do. And Matt and another rabbi, Igor Zinkov, were sitting at the table, and they said, what do you need? And let us give it to you. And they really fulfilled on that, on that promise to me, which I'm eternally grateful, and it's just been an amazing situation. Interestingly, I find the secular world pretty closed off to this project. So my community, I get things like, it's very churchy. It's very churchy. Don't really want to do that. And what it made me realize was that my world has actually become very closed off. We're not talking to each other anymore. So this collection is to get us talking. It's to open up and to have respect across the barriers, because I was a very angry lesbian in my 20s, can I just say? A very angry atheist lesbian. Can you? You've come across these before, yeah. It's rare breed, yeah. So I get it. But I also feel that it is very important to acknowledge that religious spaces have been so positive to me around this collection. And like the leading cathedrals, the synagogues, it's been a very positive space. And I found so many openly queer Muslims who are so positive about this project and how to move forward. And Hedaya are a really important charity as well, who do great work. And it's been very positive. But I'd love to ask you, Pat, about just a little bit more around the Anglican side of things and Episcopalian, because you guys have done some huge, there's been really big change, and a lot of people don't know about it, but the fact that gay marriage is fully legal, I only learned it recently, and I suppose it's not something that everybody knows about.
Well, as many of you know, Anglicanism is not a church, it's a communion of churches, 40 churches, and everyone knows the Church of England, which is because the Archbishop is the convener of the entire communion. But each of the national churches are autocephalic, like the Orthodox churches are. So the Episcopal Church in the United States is an independent church, as are all the other Anglican churches. I say this only to say Anglicans and then have put anything after that is always going to be wrong. Because in the American Anglican Church, in the Episcopal Church, we have been on a steady move toward the normalization of LGBTQ people in our relationships for a very long time. And I think even before that, oddly enough, and I don't know why this is, we have always just been full of gay people. I mean, I just don't know why that is, but it's just true. But only recently we've decided to fess up. As Father said about, his friends, like, girl. And I think we just finally came to a point where we said, girl, come on, let's be real about this. So, but it's not true of all the Anglican churches or all the Anglican people. So, for example, the Church of England is in absolute knots over this whole thing. Whereas the Church of Canada is very much like we are. And when you go to Africa, for example, the Church of Southern Africa, which is the country of South Africa, is very much like the American church in this regard. But then you go to the other churches like the Diocese of Kenya, where they literally would sign on to the government's desire to imprison us gay people. So Anglicanism is really not a thing. But I mean, it's a thing, but it's not a monolith. How we got to this place in the United States, honestly, I think we did it by breaking rules. And Father Massingale and I were talking about this the other day. One of the unfortunate things, I think, about the way we in the Episcopal Church went about getting ourselves to this point is people just basically said, yeah, we know what the rules are, but we're going to break them. We are going to ordain gay people, openly gay people. We are going to bless, even in informal ways, same-sex unions. In 2009, 10, 11, I was asked to be on a commission of the entire church because our convention, which is actually meeting right now in Louisville, we meet every 3 years, had authorized a study of the possibility of blessing same-sex unions that had been civilly made. And they asked me to be the chair of the committee to produce the liturgy. So from all over the United States, we sent out and asked people to send us examples of such things that actually existed. And the thing that was so interesting is we got boxes and boxes and boxes of these actual de facto marriage rites that we've been doing for years. And some of them were done on ditto. How many of you are old enough to remember ditto, the purple on the white? I mean, that was the Paleolithic era. There were dinosaurs roaming around. So we've been doing this for a very long time, though it was illegal. Our problem, I think, is that now that we're doing it, we need the theology to catch up with the behavior. And I don't think we're there yet. So at least in the American church, we just basically just said to hell with it, and we did it. Which led to a major schism, as you know. I mean, the Episcopal Church, we lost entire dioceses over this. But
it's interesting you talked about the opposition, and you talked about how the secular spaces can be more closed than religious spaces. And it reminded me of something I've experienced and that my younger students at Fordham experience, is that they're gay and religious, they have to, in a sense, come out twice. That they come out once as being queer, and then another time as being a queer person who takes religion seriously. Because what we experience in some queer spaces is that, well, why are you religious? Like, why are you sleeping with the enemy kind of thing? That they have, what everyone has in common is they don't see the two as going together. And so to be a queer person of religion opens you up to, hostile fire from both camps. How do I handle opposition? One of the things is I'm not on social media. I have no Facebook, no Twitter, no Instagram. If you want to insult me, either take the time to actually write me an email. Because social media can be a really toxic, dangerous place. And I don't want and don't need that kind of negativity. Because trust me, people do take the time to write horrible emails. I save them on I have a file called Bloggers Complaints. And so I file them there, and every once in a while I pull them out. One of my favorites, not just because you're here, it became, "Dear Father, greetings from Ireland. Shame, shame, shame." I'm like, oh my God. And then it just went on and on and on and on and on. And then and then it's like, "Why don't you join the Episcopal Church? They accept perverts like you." And I'm like, oh my God, I'm right there.
Welcome.
Yeah, really. And again, I think that being a queer person of faith is in some ways a more precarious place to be than either being rejecting of faith or to be a queer person of no faith, if that makes sense. Because you really do open yourself up to, the looks of incomprehension, disbelief. Like, why would you bother to do that to yourself? I get that a lot. Why would you bother to do this to yourself? Why would you bother to belong to a church that doesn't accept you? And what I hear from you and from you is that we belong to religious traditions that are very complicated things. And we make the wager that our traditions are rich enough that they have the resources to change and to grow. And so we want to be in dialogue with these traditions even as we struggle with them, wrestle with them. But I just think that the opposition comes from both ends. And from the secular world, like some of my friends at Fordham are like, this is a thing, and like you really have to worry about, income. I mean, they look at me, it's like, well, being queer at Fordham is not that hard. But I do think that idea of being queer and religious opens you up to a different kind of conversation, a different kind of danger, a different kind of marginalization, if that makes any sense.
Could I just comment on what you said there? I'm going to be brutally honest with you. When you said that idea, why would you put yourself through this? That's one of the first questions that started this collection in my head. I needed to understand it. I needed to understand the answer to that. And what I discovered with what I was doing, just from, if you take the faith aspect out of the conversation, which I know is hard to do, for me, I was realizing these are organizations that are operating in countries who are, for some reason, allowed to ignore the equality acts of the countries that they live in. And why is that able to happen? And that's been the really big question I've been asking, and that's what I'm trying to get people to see that. Because at the moment, religion feels slightly untouchable. And what happens is people leave it rather than challenge. And that's why I think the subjects in this collection are unbelievable, because I didn't have the energy to do what they're doing. I don't have the energy to do it. It's incredible what you're all doing. It's incredible. And I really wanted to just highlight that these are people who are you're not accepting a lesser life for yourself. You're fighting to make things better. It's like it's incredible. Because there is that, like, oh, why would you do that? And as well, the other side to it as well was that when I started this collection, I started to talk to friends just at the very beginning of it. Everybody said to me, you won't get anybody for this collection. There's nobody who will sit for you for this. Like that was constantly what I was being told. And, you won't get a queer rabbi. Oh my God. I was like, well, Matt's one of the only straight rabbis I know now, So it was insane, and especially then, in the Anglican Church. And I have to say the most difficult faith that I found with this collection was the Roman Catholic, and we spoke about that, and that was weirdly validating for me because that was the one I grew up in. So I was like, oh, that's why it felt so hard, actually. That's great. So it has been a journey. It's been a huge journey, but also I'm trying to just rise questions out of it that we can engage as secular people into it, that why is this being allowed to happen, and why are we not making sure that this doesn't happen? How can organizations who operate in the land where equality acts are present, how are they allowed to do this? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about employees who are being discriminated against in a way that would not be tolerated in any other organization. We've spoken about this with certain leaders who have said certain things recently, and those things would not be allowed to be said by any other leader or CEOs of companies. And I love that you describe yourself as the CEO, because it's how we need to start talking. It's how we need to start talking about this, I think, in my humble opinion.
How about you, Zain? What kind of pushback have you gotten?
A bit of pushback. I think probably the biggest was last year. Yes, it was probably last year. A letter was signed. I think it was by over 80 Islamic leaders, imams, institutions. I forget the name of this letter, but it was signed. And it basically acted as almost like this official declaration that Islam does not allow homosexuality or people of varying gender and sexual identities. It was meant to almost be like this manifesto, this absolute declaration. And that was probably, for our organization, our community, it was like the largest punch in the stomach that we could, like many people could see. Because I think for a long time, it's always been in Islam, because, you know, old Abrahamic faiths, it's always up to interpretation. That is what we're kind of battling. It's like, whose interpretation are we trying to follow or listen to or find validation in? But the fact that we found like 80 people, like, you know, people from around the world coming together to just say, like, you cannot exist, this is not allowed, we've declared in this faith, that hurt. But, you know, our organization was like, all right, a day goes on. And I think the fact that really sold it for us was after this letter came out, it just made us we realized that we have to work harder to basically let people know that the way that they have chosen to interpret it is fine. That's their thing, though. And with Islam, since it's up to interpretation, I mean, it was written in a dialect of Arabic that people today can't really speak or even translate very well. And so when I always tell people about it, it's that you have to find a version that makes sense to you, and not something that has just been told to you. And I think that is always something that is hard for people to stomach, because it's for them tackling tradition, they feel like they're then like fighting against, like it was found in like 1600 CE. So it's like, you know, tackling for almost 1400 years of tradition, of culture. But that's the thing, there's also a difference between religion and culture and sexuality. They're different, but they become enmeshed. And I think especially today, with the current context of the world, especially in like Arab American world and the Middle East, the fact that in Islam, religion and government have become entwined, it basically, which then also government is then the mask for business, for capitalism, it enmeshes a lot of things and it taints that religion. So I think it's always hard for people to see, like, what is the actual religion saying? And so we've been able to find people who will speak out. But I think the largest and difficult part is actually, for a lot of times, the allies, like the imams who are allies of the community, who are actually afraid to speak out most of the time because of the pushback that they will get from their like members of the congregation, the supporters that they will lose. And I think that is also, something that we always have to acknowledge. So for me, I think it's beautiful, the work that you do and the stance that you take in the community, because I know a number of imams and sheikhs who actually are accepting. They have no personal qualms at all, because it's to each their own. But it's always the whole, like, what will other people say and do? Because then they will take it out on other members as well.
And now, Rabbi, why don't you give your answer, and then maybe it'll be by then about 7:15, and then we'll do 15 minutes of questions and comments from those of you who have come to spend the evening.
So if you left this space thinking that all denominations of Judaism are... Oh, sorry for waking you, love. If you left this space thinking that all denominations of Judaism are queer-friendly spaces, then I would have been doing a disservice. That's just not the case. Where I am right now in progressive Judaism in the UK is the same as you'd find here in the US. It's a very positive space. So I am not the person I was 21 years ago when I was living in Israel, studying in the most religious part of Jerusalem, and in an institution that their hope was that however you came there, you would leave with the uniform, with the black hat and the beard and everything. And I left after about 6 months to go study just up the street at Yeshiva University, Orthodox, but a little bit different. And one of the friends I made there disappeared after about 2 years, and I found him in 2007 on another trip to Jerusalem, drunk in the streets, and he came out to me, and it was one of those moments where I was like, well, yeah, he didn't have to come out to me. But what I found out afterwards was horrifying, because he was studying at the school that I had studied at when I went to Israel. Only I found out about a different program they had. So I knew about their drug rehab program. I did not know about their gay rehab program. And living as an Orthodox Jew at that time, and seeing that, yes, I had gay classmates. They probably weren't open about it. The rabbis probably knew, but we were young, and maybe they were just trying to figure themselves out. But to see someone who's crying, saying, I'm supposed to marry a woman, I'm supposed to have kids, and I don't want to live, and that Judaism was doing that to them, is horrifying. And that was a breaking point for me, where I stepped away for many years and said, I can't be part of this. And the only thing that brought me back was the Reform progressive Judaism of my youth. So I'm in a really lucky space, because I'm actually one of maybe 2 men in my rabbinic program, right? One of very few straight people. It's a different world. You see how upset it makes her, even to know. And I was just saying this earlier today, that my dream is that the world that my daughter gets to see, that she won't even know about any of this. We won't have to do this. Why do we have to do this? Because it's still a conversation, and because if the conversation's not happening, then we're doing something wrong. The pushback might come from our relationships with the United Synagogues, the Orthodox Jews in England or here. Although we have the most accepting chief rabbi, Fran Marshall, at the moment, who actually speaks to women who have been ordained Orthodox, which is a very new thing. And we'll have conversations with them, which is very nice of him. But his predecessor, the amazing and renowned Jonathan Sacks, whose books are on my shelves, they belong on everyone's shelves. They're incredible books about morality and ethics and being a human in the world today. When Rabbi Mark Solomon came out to him, the person who ordained him, he was told he had to make a choice, be himself or be a rabbi. And he had to walk away. And he was asked to hand back his smicha, his ordination, right? Give back the certificate. And he said, no, you can't take it from me. And I'm blessed that he's one of my teachers. Those are the stories of people that still find Judaism, even when Judaism has not found them within it. And they make the space for other people. Those are the voices I want to elevate. Because it's so easy for me to walk away, or I don't have to see that. I didn't have to be here today, right? This isn't my fight, but if I don't see that it's my fight, and if my colleagues and my interfaith colleagues don't see it as their fight, it's a disservice to the beautiful space that religion can be, and it should be. And it should not be the place where someone is crying in the streets because their religion is telling them that they're broken.
I think there's something so beautiful, sorry, Patrick, about that. And I think in all faiths, regardless, I'm going to, just blanket say this, but I feel like we always say, I am Christian, I am Jewish, I am Muslim, but it's not just it's a spectrum. Just like how sexuality is a spectrum, religion is a spectrum. We have Muslims and then we have Muslim-ish people. They exist. And I think one of the things that I always tell people, I'm not a theologian, I am not, a religious leader by any means necessary, is the fact that in the Quran we have a verse that basically translates to God is closer to you than your jugular vein. It's beautiful, but the fact that God is basically you, it is within you, it is so close, how could something like that hate you? And I think that is also something that I always tell people that so irks me is when they say God hates me, or Islam hates me or my people. If you think about putting the words God and hate in the same sentence, it just does not make sense because he created us all. And so then I always tell people God doesn't hate, people hate. That's the only way to look at it. And so who are you really following? Who are you choosing to follow, God or people? And I think that is what we always have to make the distinction as. And I think especially as, give it you two as the mission. It's religious leaders to make that delineation to people.
And it's beautiful, I believe that. But recently in the Catholic Church, we're just going through this horrible, talking about, people hating. Where the Pope, has said, pretty awful things, using, a horrific slur that I don't care whether you say it in Italian, Spanish, English, it's awful. And, I have been very vocal about speaking about this and saying this is a denigration of my humanity. There is no situation in which that's even permissible. And I think that, but it's still hard because people look at me and saying, well, you're being disrespectful to the Pope. Well, no, the Pope is being disrespectful to me and to a whole group of people. And not only that, but that word has been used to ostracize and to hurt and to maim and to kill people. And in the name of religion, if I don't stand up and challenge that, then I have to leave. And I think what we have to do is to realize that religions are always acts of conversation and contestation and debate and dialogue. And I'm not willing to give up my faith, even to the person who's supposed to be the leader of it, and to recognize that, yes, he is a human being, but he also has to learn. And people always look at Pope Francis and say, but he's this wonderful pro-LGBTQ person. And I said, yes, he is. He's had an historic outreach that's never happened before, and he still has a lot to learn. And both things can be true. And I think that the ability to hold two things together in your head, even when they're paradoxical, I think that's the gift of queer religion. And it's also the thing that, makes it exciting and hard at the same time.
I'm wondering if there's anybody out there who'd like to speak to any of us up here. And, thank you, Jason. Jason is going to take care of the mic out there.
Thank you for all of y'all for talking and sharing your experiences. I was just wondering if any of you can talk about any, mystical, spiritual experiences that you've all had, maybe have had, that have kind of affirmed your belief and route on this path of affirming queerness and faith. I think it's just an interesting question to ask and to hear kind of where people's individual experiences with the divine have kind of led them to continue on this path, especially when it gets hard and people are asking, why this? So I'm wondering if you want to share any of those experiences with us.
Well, I guess I can say this. I've never had a mystical experience in my life. But there's an and to that. But I live in the middle of an ongoing, never-ending mystical experience, which is to say, at least in the Christian dispensation, I would say that we believe that God operates, especially in traditions like Father's and mine, that God operates through created matter. God operates through what really is, and that God comes to us in the most ordinary of things, like Jesus makes himself actually truly present to us in bread and wine, and that God actually saves people eternally through the pouring of water. I mean, as crazy as that may sound, that is sort of how our tradition works. And so my experience of God's affirming my own queerness has been through me simply living my life as a queer person and knowing that God's care for me has not happened despite that, but in the midst of that my queerness is where God saves me. And so it's not that it's anything mystical as if lightning flashing and any of that. It's an ongoing sense of God moving through my life, oftentimes in the very presence of my queerness. And because of it, people have said to me, wouldn't it have been nice if you could have been straight? And I say, I would never want to be straight. No, I wouldn't, not in a million years, because it's in my gayness that I have come to know the fullness of life. And the fullness of life, I believe, is the presence of God. So...
Well, I think I have had a mystical experience. Actually, this is part of my own coming out experience. In a Catholic seminary, we have to make a spiritual retreat every year. And one of those is a quiet retreat where you have total silence, You're given scripture passages to pray over each day and you're to see yourself in the passage. And so I went under protest because I thought, I want to talk, but I can't. So I was given the passage in the Christian, what we call the Old Testament, we call Hebrew Scriptures, the book of Genesis, the creation story where God is creating the cosmos, the world, everything into being in 7 days. And I was called to put myself in that situation. And so I put myself as the observer and watched all of creation come to be. You know, the stars, the moon, the sea monsters, the sea people, and I could see everyone in creation. And then at the end of my prayer experience, I looked at all of creation and realized that there wasn't a single black person in creation, nor were there any gay people in creation. And it shook me to my core because it meant that despite hearing that, growing up thinking that God loves everyone and everything, that at some deep level, I didn't believe it. So I told this to my director who was directing the retreat, and she said, well, I think we have some work to do, don't we? And so she gave me other passages to pray over that talked about God's love. And I didn't want to hear it, because for the first time in my life, I got in touch with the anger I had. Because I didn't want to be black. I didn't want to be gay. I didn't want this life of pain. And I was, we were saying at church, I was pissed with God for doing this to me. And it was only after I could pour out all of my anger and hurt and frustration that then there was this beautiful verse from the prophet Isaiah, because you are precious in my sight and I love you. And I could break down in tears because for the first time, I could actually accept that God loved me as I was. Now, when I tell the story, it sounds too neat because that story took place when I was 24, and there came, about 40 more years of growing into that. But I think it's because it shows the power of our faith, but it also shows the subtle, insidious ways where despite a message of love that's proclaimed, there are other contrary messages that seep in there. We call it internalized homophobia. And it's something we still have to struggle against because that message is so pervasive in the atmosphere. So it's both it's a profoundly moving experience, but just because you have that one profound experience, for me, it set me on the course of being able to integrate my faith and my spirituality and my racial identity.
Could I just say, I think, I don't know if you're going to say something, Rabbi, but I'm aware that other people may have questions, and we're almost to the end, so maybe we can see if there's any other question that someone would like to ask before we call it a night. Oh, there we go.
This may be cheating because I've already been at a panel like this before, more than once. But what I've asked before, and I want to ask this again, was there anything that you've experienced from viewing the Queer Religion Project that has surprised you, that you were not familiar with when you were approached to do the project?
Is that to the subjects or to me? Oh, yeah.
Well, I was approached to do this project and did the project basically like 2 hours before this panel started. I think for me, because I looked at the project really like a few days ago, and that's when I think for me, it was looking at the fact that I think we see so much division between each other's faiths and each other's worlds. And then I think seeing and reading the stories of other folks in similar positions made me just realize, wow, we're dealing with the same hatred. The hatred is just going into different funnels, going through different mediums, and it's coming out the same way. And we each have to just find that people have found such remarkably unique ways to combat, to come to terms with it. And I think that was honestly for me like something I was just very like inspired by, and all frankly, because I think even though I am like a queer Muslim, there is still something to be learned from someone who's queer and Jewish, who's queer and Catholic, queer Episcopalian, about just like how do you deal with just the hatred in the world, but also like how do you find love in the world? I think that's also like what the exhibit is meant to showcase. It's not just the fact that like we have come from negative places and we've like reached this pedestal. It's just finding comfort with ourselves. I think that's what I interpreted the exhibit and the show and the project to be.
If I can just add something to what you're saying, I was with Nat and Sazia this morning, and we had the most incredible conversations. And one of the things we were talking about is it was an imam that you spoke about who said they don't know how to deal with our joy. They're used to our pain, they're used to our suffering, they're used to us being hurt, but they don't know what to do with our joy. And this collection is about queer joy. I hope you're feeling the positivity that I'm trying to bring with it. It's a positive collection.
Yeah. No. When you sent me the email asking me to participate, and I was like, oh no. I mean, I don't know who this is. You get these strange emails. I'm like, who is this person? And so I went to the website, and I was blown away. Because I thought, well, this is going to be like a queer, like religious, RuPaul's Drag Race or something. Nothing against Drag Race. I love it. But anyway, it is a great idea. But another project. And the thing that caught me was that when I looked at the photographs, it was like I saw people's souls. You captured their interior, their soul, that they were people who were of prayer. And I think that's something people don't associate, that queer people can be people of prayer. And you captured us in our serenity and our joy, but you captured there's an interiority about us. And when I saw the pictures, that's when I wrote you back and said, yes, absolutely. I would be happy to be a part of this project because people don't look at us and see that we can be people of prayer. That queer people pray. And that's not, and it's not pious, but it's beautiful and profound. And I think that's what you captured. And I was like, that's why I really wanted to be a part of this. And you did it. Yeah.
Thank you. If I could give a blended answer to what came up with both questions. We're talking about, not how did you, was it a miraculous moment, or how did you phrase, a mystical? I've obviously been processing an awful lot while creating this project. Every person I meet is incredible, and I learn something new every time. And Avi, your question around, learning about starting this collection. So I'm a graduate of Maynooth University in Ireland, and it's an amazing place for arts education in general, and it's a wonderful university, and I loved my time there. It's also the seminarian university where they train Roman Catholic priests. And I got an email last year from a woman called Karen Kelly, who is the events organizer there of this festival, and she asked, could they put queer religion in permanent exhibition into that space? And for me, that's a miraculous moment. That was something that makes you really shiver, because that's huge for them to put something like this in there, because that's what they wanted to say. And I'm eternally grateful for that, because it's sitting right in the center of the President's Building. It's not hidden in some corner. It is at the center and the heart of the university. It's moments like that. And then the other one was going to your Mass yesterday morning. So, like I said, I was raised Roman Catholic, and I was sitting journaling afterwards. Don't judge me. And I was writing, and I just kept saying, if it was like that, I would never have left. And that was really profound. And I realized and I was saying, how do I get bits of this back as your sermon? I won't go into it because it was amazing. It was just so profound. But it was also the congregation, the sense of family, the sense of support. It was beautiful. It was like this energy and the music and everything. It was just the most incredible experience. And I realized it wasn't about getting that back. It was like, it was never there. You know, me going to Mass every Sunday wasn't fun. Like, it was boring as hell. It was sorry, but it was dreadful. And there was no engagement in the fact that, you know, they had a full church when when I'm 38 now. So when I was a kid, the churches were full. And it was just dogmatic preaching, very negative. And I was like, well, what am I losing here in converting to atheism? I was like, what am I actually losing here? And I realized it was nothing. But in the same way, when you're talking about education, say in maths and science, it's all about the teacher. It's all about the leader. It's all about the person who stands in front and respects that role. Because I genuinely felt like I lost nothing. But I realized if I was in your church, I would have lost everything. So we're talking about these miraculous moments. I've always been dumbfounded how some people don't see that actually our miraculous moments are through humanity. They're through experience of other humans and the work that they do. So I hope that is a blended answer for both, but anyway, yeah.
So we're just past 7:30, so we're going to wrap up. We'll hang around as long as you want, talk to my friends up here on the panel, and thanks to them for being here, for wrapping up our Pride Month at
Thank
St.
you
John
so
the Divine.
much.
So thanks to all of you. Shall we give them a hand? So St. John the Divine is a truly remarkable place, and I am honored that I work here. Things happen here, as I said to someone the other day, maybe it was even during a sermon, people say to me sometimes, so being a priest, what do you do the other 6 days of the week? But the thing about this place is it's a 7-day-a-week kind of place, and as this event proves, there are lots of great things that happen here, and that all of you are welcome, whether you believe or don't believe, or whether you believe something unbelievably different than what we believe. You're always welcome to be here with us, and we will welcome you and respect exactly who you are. So, on behalf of Matthew Hyde, the Bishop of New York, and all of the Episcopalians in the diocese, we're glad that you were here tonight, and we hope you'll come back. Thank you.